Hello, everyone. Welcome to the VISTA monthly meeting. Today, for February 21st, we are going to be covering the continuation application. I am Jancy LaFollette. I serve as a program officer with the CNCS State Office in Iowa. And this session is in regards to continuation applications. So for those of you going into year 2 or 3 of your application process, this might not be applicable to all of our programs. So if we get through this and this is something that you're wondering if it is applicable to you, please let me know. But this is for our continuation application webinar. The call is being planned for about an hour, and so we are going to move through things fairly quickly today. This is going to be just a general overview to get you started. However, if you do have questions throughout, please, we will pause for questions, but also feel free to throw some questions in the chat or the conversation box of the link system. In addition, today's session is being recorded, and so I will send out the link afterwards for folks who might want to revisit that. Just a few housekeeping things. All of the lines are open, so if you can, please place us on mute. If you don't have a mute button, *6 will mute and unmute any telephone lines. And then if you joined us via Skype, there is a radial button at the bottom of your screen that looks like a little microphone. If you click on that, that will mute your computer. So for that, I appreciate it. Please do not place us on hold. We will hear hold music in the background, and it's a little distracting and hard to talk over. And we do want to just say that this session today is a general overview. We do encourage you to review the application instructions in detail as you move through information to make sure that you fully understand the application process, or set up an individual call time with your designated program officer to go through things as well. So just making sure that folks understand this might not be all-encompassing, but at least we'll get you started. So the purpose of today's webinar is to provide a clear expectation and some common misunderstandings of the application process. The information is to help you avoid common errors. Each VISTA program is uniquely different, and they come with some different, I'll have some examples today that might not be completely applicable to your situation. So I'll try to point those out if we roll through any of those, but I just wanted to make sure folks are understanding that this is a general overview for everyone. And any specific questions you have about your project design, those might be best held for an individual call with your designated program officer. In addition, I just also have to note that all FY17 funding is subject to the federal funding appropriations. At this particular juncture, we do not have FY17 official budget yet, so I just have to throw that in just to make sure that folks understand that. The agenda for today, we'll really go over the continuation application process. We'll do a quick refresher of appropriate activities. We'll talk about completing the VISTA application in eGrants, resources that are available to you, because I am a strong believer and I don't need to know all the answers, I just need to know where to find them. And then we'll also hold some time at the end for questions and answers. But again, if you do have any questions as we roll through today, please make sure you are including those in the conversation box. If you do have a printed copy of the application instructions, I would encourage you to pull those out, as I will be noting some page numbers as we go through those, so those might be nice reference points as you're looking through stuff. So again, that application instructions, those were sent out with the original notification about your continuation applications. So just a quick overview. Obviously, if you need some more information regarding AmeriCorps and AmeriCorps VISTA, as some folks are new or previously served and are returning to the VISTA program, our nationalservice.gov website provides some great insight. The AmeriCorps VISTA program is a national service program designed specifically to fight poverty, so all of the work that we do and our members do all tie back to the poverty issues. AmeriCorps VISTA members leverage human, financial, and material resources to increase the capacity of low-income communities across the country, and really the intent is initially to have them solve their problems independently. So we really do like to have communities involved as well as our members involved in the work that our members are doing. When VISTA members complete their term of service, they do leave behind a lasting solution. So that's that capacity building and sustainability that our members focus on. As you all know, the intent of VISTA is to bring in resources for a short period of time, remove those VISTA resources, and to have the program continue without an actual member pushing those. So we just want to make sure that folks are looking at that as you're looking at your continuation and your applications. You are thinking about the end and thinking how you're going to sustain these projects as you move through them. There are some specific web tutorials that are designed to give you some more information about the VISTA project if you feel you need those. VISTA 101 and VISTA 201 are available on our VISTA campus. VISTA 101 is more of an understanding of VISTA, and 201 is an overview of the grant itself and kind of how to implement that. So they are great tutorials if you guys feel that that's something that you'd like to dive a little bit further into and get some more information about. So we want to make sure that folks are aware of the resources that are available to them. Just a quick review of the continuation process. The initial notifications for continuations were sent on February 22nd to most of our folks. Continuation applications are due on March 31st for those that are continuing into year 2 and 3, or some 4 in their project applications. All of our continuation applications must be reviewed and approved prior to the current Memorandum of Agreement, or MOA, expiration date. So everyone does have an MOA expiration, and so we do have to have the new one in place prior to the current one expiring. Again, all of the federal funds are subject to budget approval at the federal level. I do want to point out that in eGrants there is a due date. It is noted as August for those who are completing their continuation applications. The August date is just a placeholder, so please ignore that date. That is not something that is congruent for us. That is actually a date that they put in there for nationwide folks, and so ours is actually due on March 31st. So I want to make sure that when folks get into eGrants, it's something that they notice. The continuation application process, so your organization has been invited to submit a continuation request. That is done in eGrants. If you and your sponsor choose to continue, I guess you and your sponsor, not you or, you and your sponsor, choose to continue with the VISTA placements at your site and at your host sites, you will need to do a continuation application by the designated due date in order for members to continue. This is an opportunity for you to reassess your VISTA project and to make changes or adjustments as needed. So this is definitely a time to review your grant, look over it, see if you're headed in the right direction, and be able to make adjustments as you move through. All information from your previous grant will pull forward in eGrants to the continuation. So once you create it, anything you've submitted previously will pull forward, and then you can just amend as you move through stuff. So just want to make sure that folks are aware of that this is a piece of the process, but we do want you guys to look at that and review that information as you're moving forward. So any questions yet so far? We're going to do a little refresher about appropriate activities, but any questions kind of about the continuation application process and what it is, or what we're going to be talking about for the rest of the duration for today? Hearing none, I'm going to continue to roll forward. So just a quick refresher of appropriate activities for our VISTA members. Remember to build sustainability and capacity into the work of our VISTAs, and so that's really what they are meant to be developing and doing. The members should not be doing the same thing in year 3 that they were doing in year 1. So we want to make sure that our programs are building off of themselves and making sure that activities are moving the program forward. So just a few appropriate activities that our members can be doing. So some appropriate activities are building partnerships with local public and private sector organizations, mobilizing resources in and outside the community, creating community events to support the project, recruiting, training, and coordinating volunteers, engaging residents of the low-income community in the problem-solving aspects of your work, and helping the sponsor to develop an infrastructure, which may include developing new programs or updating existing ones. So these are just a few. There's many more. You guys can read them all, but these are just some activities to make sure that folks are, as they're looking at the VISTA program and they're looking at what the members are doing, they are taking into effect kind of how we're going to be building out that sustainability. The chart that you see on slide 8 really just shows how VISTA members' activities can lead to capacity building and sustainability endeavors. This is just a chart that I've found in the past that sometimes makes it a little bit more clear as to how things go. So we're going to take here, for instance, the indirect service of a member is to recruit volunteers. So this is just the service activity that the member is being provided to recruit the volunteers. And a lot of times folks ask, how does that really build capacity? And how does that really lead to a sustainability of the project? And so the capacity building activities that you see, we look at like developing forms, developing volunteer assignments, and really kind of developing that system and building that framework lead to capacity building for the example of recruiting volunteers. The sustainability, of course, is then developing the VISTA handbook, developing the systems, and really improving the process itself. And so that's just one example of kind of how a service activity can lead to sustainability. There's a few more listed here, obviously, but I'm not going to go through all of them. But this is just a nice refresher for folks, making sure that as they're looking at the services that their members are providing, they are working to those sustainable activities, and they're building upon those in year 1, 2, and 3. The next slide really talks about what members may not be able to do. And so VISTA members should not be displacing paid staff of the sponsoring organization. They should not be supervising employees or other AmeriCorps members. They are to be not assisting with kind of like a caseload or direct client work. That's something that we run into every once in a while. They're not to be doing kind of that one-on-one literacy or tutoring or program intake, kind of working with those clients directly. So we want to make sure that folks are remembering kind of what VISTA is about, and it's really about building the capacity of our programs. This is one thing that we run into every once in a while when we get into the continuation applications and moving forward, is that folks look at their applications and or they propose activities that might be walking the line of direct service. And so we just want to make sure that there is a clear line when we talk about direct and indirect service, and our VISTA members really should be doing that indirect service, that capacity building. So again, I'm not going to go through all of these, but there definitely needs to be a line drawn when you're looking at those members' activities. So keep these in mind as you're developing out your application. There is a question that came in, and it said, would you be able to share that capacity building / sustainability chart with us? Yes, Gio, I can most certainly do that. It will be in the PowerPoint, but I can actually pull that off as a separate document for you as well. So happy to do that. I think folks have asked for that before, so I'm happy to forward that along. Any questions kind of about what members can and cannot do, or what their services should be focusing on before we kind of dig into the application itself? All right. So in creating your continuation application, so there is a little cheat sheet that I'll send out after this if you guys haven't seen it already, and I call it a cheat sheet. It's just kind of some screenshots about how to start your VISTA continuation application for 2017, for FY17. The continuations are created in eGrants, and so it does have to be submitted through eGrants. The VADs themselves for the continuation application are actually submitted outside of eGrants, and so the VADs right now, there's a template for those that you can create them outside of eGrants, and we'll go over that in just a second. But I just want to make sure that folks understood that the continuation application itself is submitted in eGrants, but the VADs are actually submitted as a separate document. The NOFA, or the Notice of Funding Opportunity, that you guys will be, or availability, I'm sorry, NOFA, Notice of Funding Availability, is the FY 2017 AmeriCorps VISTA State NOFA. That is what you will be applying under. So as you create your continuation, it's going to ask which NOFA. There should hopefully only be one that you can select. However, sometimes that doesn't always happen, so just make sure that you select the right NOFA. When you create your continuation application, your grant number does not change. However, your application ID number does change. So your grant number should be like 16 VSNIA 002. And then your application ID number, anytime you make a change to that grant, it'll create a new application ID. So just making sure that folks are aware of that. Your project type does vary by sponsor. So depending on the type of sponsor you are, if you receive a support grant from us or an operational grant from us, most 90% of our sponsors are standard sponsors with cost share. And we'll talk about how you select that type in a little bit. The FY17 guidance is available to our programs through the nationalservice.gov website, and it's through the Managing VISTA sponsor page. And so this is a page, a landing page that you can find more information about kind of sponsoring a VISTA project. But the FY17 guidance is a great kind of just what we're looking for, what the corporation is looking for in 2017. So it's a nice bit of information to read through and make sure that you're reaching some of that information that's out there. On page 28 of the application instructions, so if you refer to page 28 of the application instructions, it does walk you through the project renewals / continuation request. That's where you're going to see kind of how to do things in that. Please be mindful that that does not describe what the narrative should look like or some of the other information. It just kind of walks you through it tells you to review all of that information. So do read the full application instructions. But the instructions for how to start that process are on page 28. The VADs we'll cover in a little bit, but there is going to be one VAD should be submitted per proposed position. So if you have multiple members working on the same thing in the same position, so there's 3 members who are kind of under the same position, they can all have the same VAD, so you don't have to submit 3 different ones for each of them if they're all going to be doing similar stuff. However, there should be one VAD submitted per proposed position. If those positions are going to be a little different, then you do need to create a separate VAD for each of those. So again, we'll go over that in a second, but I just wanted to make sure that those are a few highlights. The next slide, you're going to see just links to our application instructions. We already talked about the program guidance, but there is a direct link to the application instructions, again, available through the nationalservice.gov website. And then the VISTA sponsor page is that page that I was referencing in regards to just resources that are out there to become a VISTA sponsor. These are where you're going to find some useful links. So this is just the information that I wanted to make sure folks are aware of and have access to. These will be shared, of course, after the fact, but I just wanted to make sure that folks knew where to find the application instructions and the guidance. Again, it's through the nationalservice.gov website. If you're in the VISTA campus and you search for it, it will link you to them. Or if you're on nationalservice.gov and you search, you should be able to find those as well. So I just wanted to make sure that folks are aware of where to find those resources. A few quick tips. So e-grants, if you guys haven't worked in e-grants for a while, or if you've worked in e-grants a lot, there's just a few quick tips to make sure that e-grants is hopefully functioning well for you. She can be a little testy every once in a while, not going to lie, even for me. And so just a few quick tips on how to work hopefully successfully in the system. So we do encourage you to save your narratives outside of eGrants in a word processing document. eGrants itself sometimes loses information. I know you're shocked and amazed to hear that. And so making sure that you're saving those narratives. You can copy and paste them if you don't have the actual Word, the original Word document. Copy and paste them outside from eGrants to a word processing document, and then edit them and then recopy and paste them back into eGrants. eGrants does operate best in Microsoft Explorer. For those of you who use Chrome or Firefox, she can be a little more temperamental in those browsers. So she does operate best in Microsoft Explorer. That's the system that she was built to operate best in. You do want to make sure that you turn off your pop-up blockers when utilizing eGrants. Pop-up blockers hinder sometimes from advancing to the next screen. eGrants is basically a bunch of different pop-up windows, and so sometimes turning off that pop-up blocker you'll be able to see the next opportunity. So just keep that in mind. If for some reason you hit next or advance, trying to advance into the system and nothing's happening, you might have your pop-up blocker on. You do want to save often when working in eGrants, making sure that you are saving fairly often in there. Just because you're working or typing does not mean that the system is saving, so keep that in mind. You do want to make sure you're hitting that save button pretty frequently. We do encourage you, just a quick tip for the entire application process is to read the instructions. I know that sounds kind of funny, but do read the instructions carefully and fully, making sure that you understand them and you understand what's being asked of you in the application. So just make sure that you are aware of that. We do want to encourage folks to read and review your grant in eGrants prior to submitting it. Make sure it makes sense. Make sure you didn't copy and paste something over not meaning to and cut something off. That happens more frequently than I'd like to admit to folks. And so we're reviewing it and all of a sudden it's starting to make no sense. And it's because when they copied and pasted, it didn't copy and paste right. And so just make sure that once you've moved stuff into eGrants and you're ready to submit, you actually do go back and review the full application, all of your narratives, making sure it flows and makes sense and it didn't move a paragraph somewhere it's not supposed to be. Do make sure that the person who is authorizing and submitting the grant on behalf of your organization does have the authority to accept federal funds for your agency. Sometimes this is you, sometimes this is another entity or another person in your organization, and so we want to make sure that folks are aware that the authorizing representative for your sponsoring organization of VISTA does have the authority to accept federal funds. So the VISTA program is a federally funded program. These are federal resources, and so we just want to make sure that the right person is signing off and verifying the grant as you work in eGrants. They do need to have their own eGrants account, so just be mindful of that as well. So just a few quick tips. Any questions before we kind of break this down a little bit further? All right. So your application does consist of the components that are up on the screen. So an applicant information, the application information, there's narratives, your sites, performance measurements, there's documents, there's a budget, and then finally the review, authorize, and submit section. We will review each of these sections, so just be mindful of that. The criteria for sponsorship and the approval considerations are noted in the instructions on page 5 through 6, so just do review those. To begin the project application, you will log into your eGrants account. When you get into eGrants once you're logged into the system, you will see under View All Grant/Applications, that's on the right-hand side of your screen, that you have, you should be able to see one edit of application. So once you've created this, you're not going to go in and create it the same way each time. There are going to be a few different steps to go in there. So do make sure that you are paying attention to eGrants and you're not creating, a bunch of different continuation applications, but you are going in and editing the information appropriately. So just be mindful of that. Please note in the application instructions there is reference to the Summer Associate programming. Summer Associates is a separate process. Those applications are due on February 28th outside of the eGrant systems, and so we just want to make sure that folks recognize that if you're looking through the instructions, it does reference Summer Associates. If you are interested in the Summer Associate program, which is a short-term 8 to 10 week program over the summer months, there is a separate application process for that, so just making sure that folks are aware of that. The applicant information. So this is really your DUNS number and your SAMS registry. This is a universal identifier for all entities that receive federal resources. The applicant information is found on page 7 of the application instructions. Some of the information will pre-populate from your concept paper or from your previous application. Please take the time to verify that the information is entered correctly. So just making sure that everything is accurate. A few things to note: the named authorized representative needs to be the staff person who's authorized to accept federal funds. So just be mindful of that. If that person is listed in there, so if you'll see someone's listed that is no longer with your organization, once you submit, that name will change. So that's a little thing in eGrants. Even though you're logged under you and you might be the authorized representative, until you actually submit under your account, that authorized representative name will not change. So just be mindful of that, because I know that will come up in a few of your instances. You need to confirm your EIN number and your DUNS number. So you do want to make sure that you do confirm those numbers. And you do need to be registered on SAM. So SAM is the System for Award Management. It's kind of a universal identifier registration. And so do go on to SAM and make sure that you are registered, the sam.gov website. It is a free registry. There are some scams out there for folks looking to make a quick buck that sell they'll register you on SAM for $500. Such a deal. It's a free registry. So just make sure that you go on and do it yourself, because it'll save you a few $100s there. The application information tab, this is the proposed project dates. So check your memorandum of agreement. The start date will be the date after your current MOA ends. Those, again, should be filled in, but just making sure that that information is correct. The application is not subject to Executive Order 12372, so you don't have to check that box. You will need to indicate if your organization is delinquent on any federal debt. The program type for the vast majority of you is standard, and you will need to check the cost share box. So please be mindful of that. Page 7 of the application instructions does walk through this section, and so you are going to include the areas affected by the proposed project. These are populated from the information that has already been entered, but again, edit this information if necessary and list only the geographic areas such as towns, cities, counties, state. For most of you, it's just going to be a town or a county that you're going to be entering in there. The proposed project start and end dates are 1 year. So though the grants are typically 3 to 4 years in total length, we do a grant based on an annual renewal. And so the proposed project end date will be 12 months. Please keep in mind that this does not align with when your members start and end. Your M of A has to be in place prior to anything being able to happen, such as recruitment and all that fun stuff. So making sure that that's not going to align when your members start and end. I know that throws most people off, but just keep that in mind. So if you guys do have any questions, let us know. Make sure that cost share box is checked, because if you fail to check that, when you get into the budget section, it will not give you the appropriate information to fill in. So that does make a big difference. If for some reason that box is not checked, the correct budget will not pull up. So just be mindful of that. We're going to move into the narratives now, but any questions about the applicant or application info tabs? All right. For the narratives, again, all information rolls forward, so please update as appropriate. Pages 8 through 12 of the application instructions do go through each of the narratives in length. If you are using a word processing system, please copy and paste, not cut and paste. You'll thank me for that later. Do avoid special formatting, such as tabs or tables, bullet points and tables. eGrants does not accommodate for those, and it gets a little squirrely once you copy and paste. There is a character limitation. However, it's a great one. So we do want you to be concise. I'm not sure exactly what the length restriction is. Very few people hit it, though there are a few on this phone who have hit it before. So there is a character limitation with that. I'm not sure exactly what it is because it's in no instructions that I've ever found, but there is one. So be concise. Include activities for the entire project period for which you are requesting resources. We do encourage you type both the question and the answer in the narrative section if the space will allow. It just helps with the review process as you move through that. So these are just a few tips with the narratives. This screen really breaks down each of the needs, strengthening communities, organizational capacity, and so on as to where those instructions are found in the application instructions. Just be mindful of those. Please read, answer the questions, address kind of what those are needed. Review it, make sure it makes sense. For those of you who are taking over a grant that's been in place, make sure it makes sense as to your understanding of the grant itself and where the members should be working towards. So this is just something that we want to make sure folks are aware of. The other section, so there is an other narrative section. This should be left blank. For the most of you, this is actually where some of the summer associate information goes into for those who are approved for summer associates. So just keep that in mind. The summary of accomplishments section, everyone should be filling this out. It does say it could be non-applicable to folks. If you haven't previously sponsored VISTA programming before, you all have. So make sure that that summary of accomplishments is completed in that on page 12 that gives you more detail. And then the executive summary, there is a template provided in the application instructions on page 12. It is about 4 to 6 sentences, so just be mindful of that. That's what they're looking for, what we're looking for. They're not looking for a 4-page executive summary. It is literally 4 to 6 sentences. So keep that in mind. You can't obviously expand upon that, but just, again, read the instructions. So any questions really about narratives? I'm not going to go into each one of them. If you read the instructions, answer the questions, you should be set. So any questions about narratives before we kind of dive into sites? So on page 13 of the instructions, it's going to walk you through the sites. So as I said earlier, the continuation and renewal application instructions are on page, they start on like page 26, 28, but then what each of these components should consist of is kind of earlier in the application instructions. So that's why you're seeing me referencing these earlier pages because that's where it sends you back to. So just be mindful of that. Page 13 of the instructions does walk you through the sites. So in this section, you're going to list all of the sites that will receive either one or more VISTA members or leaders that will benefit from the efforts being performed. If there are no other sites than your own, please click add a new site and just list your organization. So if it's just you serving as the sponsoring organization and the sites, you're still going to have to list yourself as a site. The information you'll need to complete in this screen includes the name of the organization, the designated site supervisor, the designated site supervisor's phone number, the physical address where that member will be serving, including the full zip code +4. The system can override that. However, they're getting pretty picky about us including those +4 in there. So if you know them, please include them. The supervisor's email, and then the organization that that member is going to be serving at, their EIN number. So making sure that you have that information before you start will help you with any headaches as you move forward. You are going to indicate the type of the site type. Excuse me, I can talk. So either a performance measurement site or a member placement site or both. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be both. It's going to be the project location where the member is physically serving, as well as who is also benefiting from the member's service. So a member placement site sometimes is just where they're physically sitting, but they're not actually benefiting that site. They're benefiting a different site. So it might be they're sitting in a library, but they're actually working with the school is the main example here, because there's not a physical location for them at that school. So that's the differences between those as you look at that. But again, most of the time they're going to be both for most of the folks that I know here. Um, as I said earlier, your VISTA Memorandum of Agreement does not align with your VISTA member start and end dates. So your current FY16 MOA, including your current service sites and currently serving members, will overlap with this application. So for your FY17 MOA. So there is going to be an overlap. Keep that in mind as you're developing sites. If you have a site that a member is currently serving at, they end in June, and they're not continuing, you still need to include them on the grant application because you still have a member serving there. So just keep that in mind, that there is some overlap in the service terms, in the service term and the application, I'm sorry. So make sure you account for your currently serving VISTAs and the service sites beyond kind of May is when most of your MOAs end. May and moving forward. So this is something to keep in mind for sites as well as performance measures, making sure that you are accounting for those. So a lot of times those change over the course of the year, but we want to make sure that those that are currently serving are still accounted for in the FY17 application, which is what you're going to be working on. So I'm hoping that makes sense. The performance measures are found on page 13 through 22 of the application instructions. The VISTA projects generally have two main conceptual components. So to build the capacity of programs or organizations, and to help individuals and communities out of poverty. So those are kind of the two main conceptual components of any VISTA project. The performance measures module in eGrants contains two screens that you're going to enter information into about these two conceptual components. The first is the performance measurement screen. This is where you're going to describe how VISTA resources will build the capacity of your program or your organization. The second is an anti-poverty screen, and this is where you're going to describe how your organization or program will help individuals and communities out of poverty. There's a link on the screen to the performance measurements for VISTA. There's also an online tutorial. I do encourage you to watch the online tutorial about performance measurements before starting this section if you're not sure where to start. It can be a helpful guide to get you started. So in the performance measurement screens, you will navigate through screens to enter information about your proposed project in the form of performance measures. The performance measures you enter will be the basis for future progress reporting. So I often have people come to me and say, where did these numbers come from? What is this? Where is this from? It's information that you gave us that you're telling me how we're going to judge success of your program. So think of that. Remember that you are going to have to report out on these performance measurements. So on the performance measurement screen, you're going to enter information about the capacity building aspects for each project site. Again, this is broken down by site, so you're going to have performance measurements for each of the sites that you just entered in the previous screens. So keep that in mind. For each site that is going to be working with the VISTA program, you're going to need to choose a capacity goal that you hope to reach at the site, the number of VISTA members or leaders that you're requesting for the site, and the focus of their service activities. At least one capacity building output and at least one capacity building outcome must be selected. You can select more than that, but at least one have to be selected per site. And you will need to provide information about how the data will be collected in your collection plan. So for my applicants who are requesting leaders, again, leaders are programs that have 8 or more members. They can have a leader. You may include information about your leaders in your performance measurement set with other VISTAs, or create a separate performance measurement set for that leader. So keep that in mind as you move through this. Again, pages 14 through 19 walk you through the performance measurement screen. It does, again, reference summer associates. Again, do not include information about summer associates at this time unless you're applying for the summer associate program. If you are, the concept papers are due on February 28th. Make sure that you do hit the save button before moving to the next screen. In my mind, the save button is on the wrong side of the screen in eGrants. It's actually on the left-hand side, and the next button is on the right-hand side, and I automatically want to hit next to move on, but be mindful that you do want to save your information before moving on. So just keep that in mind. So capacity building examples. that they will give you. So you're going to be using the performance measurement screen to select a capacity building goal from a list. So they're going to give you a list that you're going to pull from. CNCS defines capacity building as a set of activities that expand scale, reach, efficiency, or effectiveness of a program or organization. And activities may also increase the ability of the program or organization to leverage resources. So you're going to select a capacity building goal for each site. The sites can all have the same capacity building goal, or they can have separate ones for each of the sites that you're working with. It's up to you and them to determine that. You're going to choose one of the following capacity building goals that best reflects the intent of the site. So scale and reach, effectiveness, efficiency, and leveraging resources. Page 15 of the application instructions does define each of these and what they mean by scale and reach, effectiveness, efficiency, and leverage resources. If none of the goals represent the capacity you aim to build, you may check the last box of the list and create your own capacity building goal in the text box. Please note, we highly encourage you to select a capacity building goal from the list provided. We are trying to streamline how we're working with our VISTA programs, and so if there is something that might not fit exactly you don't think, please ask. But we do want you to select from the list if at all possible. So that is the performance measurement screen. Again, page 15 of the application instructions will walk you through this in more detail. From the performance measurement screen, you're also going to select service activities. The service activities for the site and the capacity building goal for the proposed project year. There's a table with descriptions and examples. So again, these service activities are selected from a drop-down menu on page 16 and 17 of the application instructions. You can select as many service activities categories as you want that the member will be working on, so just be mindful of that. In the text box next to the service activity, though, you are going to have to provide a description of those service activities as it's related to that category. So this is in bright red on the screen because most people forget to do this. They select an activity and they move on. They don't actually give us a description of what that activity is going to be. So the activities can be like a community assessment, outreach, financial resources. Well, we want to know what you mean by that. Are they going to be doing an annual community assessment? What is that on? Those types of things. Outreach, that's such a broad term. So what do we mean by that? And so the service activities, again, are on page 16 and 17 of the application instructions. Make sure that you select one and that you fill in the text box next to it. The next screen you're going to see is the outputs and outcomes. So again, as I said, at least one output and at least one outcome for each of these. You will collect and report data on the capacity building output and outcome, and you may select more than one output and outcome. So just be mindful of that. Again, if none of the outputs or outcomes on the list represent what your site may be planning to do, you can select your own. Again, look at the drop-down menu, select what best fits. We get a lot of people who just don't look at it and create their own, and it is exactly what is on the list. So just be mindful of that. Reading those instructions is imperative. And we do encourage you to look at the National Service website for more instructions about what the performance measurements are and what we mean by them. Data collection information. So we want to make sure that folks are collecting data. Again, this is all from drop-down menus. Page 18 through 19 really talks about entering that information. The unit of measure will automatically appear as you select that, and you're going to enter the number of VISTAs requested for that capacity building goal. So just keep that in mind as you're looking through this. This is where you're going to add your target numbers, and this is where you're really setting that standard of measurement for us as we move through this. So keep that in mind on the performance measurements. We spend a lot of time on these screens because this really is where you're building a lot of the information for the impact of the program. This is where we're really getting to the meat of the VISTA program. So that's why we wanted to spend more time on those screens than others. The anti-poverty screen is what you move to next. So you have the performance measures and the performance measurement screens, and then we have the anti-poverty screens. Once you've entered all the capacity building information for the site, you're going to add anti-poverty info button to advance to the anti-poverty screen. So on this screen, you're going to enter information about how the organization or programs helps individuals and communities out of poverty. You're going to enter only the anti-poverty programming aspects that specifically relate to the project site. You're going to identify the output, the outcome, the anti-poverty program, strategy or intervention, and then you're going to enter the number of VISTA members requesting be working on this. Entering information about the data collection plan is optional. So this is one of these tricky ones. If you're planning on measuring how many students you're working with that are directly affected, and you can measure that, please enter the data collection information. However, if your goal is we're hoping to, from the work of the volunteers they're going to be working with, we're hoping to reach whatever, I don't know, 1 million people, but we're not really sure how to measure that yet, don't enter any data collection information, because if you do enter data collection information, then you have to report out on it. So this is something that you want to look and spend some time on these anti-poverty screens. So again, it's the priority focus area, what you're going to be focusing on with your work. What's the anti-poverty focus area? What's the objective and the outputs and the outcomes? But again, that data collection piece is the piece that is optional. So this is one of those things that gets a little tricky in my mind anyways, to wrap my heads around why is this optional or why are we entering all the rest of this information in here. But this is how the instructions are done, and so I'm just trying to make sure that folks understand that. So if you do enter data collection information, again, you are required to report out on it, but it is an optional piece if that's something that you're not quite equipped for. So keep that in mind. The budget, I guess before we move on to the budget, any questions about capacity building screens or the performance measurements, the anti-poverty screens or the capacity building screens? Okay. The budget, I know this is all such intriguing information for everyone, and I apologize for the dullness of the topic, but the budget. So all VISTA projects, regardless of type, must have a budget. There is no specific match requirement for VISTA, but the budget documents the type and level of resources the sponsor will provide to support the project. There are several line items that might be estimates. For example, the education award and the stipend, the cash stipend, end of service benefit, because these depend on the choice that each member or leader make, and you cannot estimate that at this time. What we encourage you to do is for any member slot that you have, so if you have 4 VISTA members serving with your program, we encourage you just to select the education award for all 4. 9 times out of 10, that's what they're going to select, but the budget, again, is just a framework that we go off of. So don't try to overthink it. eGrants will create a budget and a budget narrative automatically from the detailed information you've entered. So once you have your budget information in eGrants, you'll be asked to validate the budget, and eGrants will check your submission for errors. Please use whole dollars with no cents, because that will throw an error message into the system. Page 26 through 27 of the application instructions walks through this. As you prepare your budget, you want to make sure you have a detailed narrative to provide a full explanation of the proposed cost included in your narratives. So if you've said we're going to provide training and our members are spread out across the state, how are you going to do that? And there's nothing in the budget for it, we're going to question that. So just be mindful of whatever you submitted in your narrative sections, it's reflected in the budget. Your budget entry should reflect a 12-month period, so keep that in mind. One thing to note, now this is for everyone, is the education award amount. eGrants may not be updated, it hasn't been here recently, to reflect the correct amount. So you may receive an error message that the amount of the education award is incorrect, even though it is correct. You've entered it correctly. However, RN for some reason doesn't always accept it correctly. The budget should still validate, it'll just pop up an error message. It's one of the weird, wonky things of eGrants, so keep that in mind, that the budget, again, will validate, even though that budget error, if it's specifically around the education award amount, but just keep an eye out for that. That's something that we've learned over the years. The budget section 1 is volunteer expenses. So this is where you're going to document resources that your organization will provide to support the project, such as personnel, supplies, etc. Information in the grantee share column, this is what you are providing, so you as the grantee. Do not enter information into the CNCS share or member support column for this section unless you have a support grant or S&T funds. So just be mindful of that. Budget section 2 is the volunteer expenses. This is a required section. The proposed budget should be sufficient for you to perform the tasks described in your narrative, as we said earlier. The full-time federal are standard members. So we use different terminologies for different things in our agency. So you have your standard members and your cost share members. Unfortunately, in the budget, we don't call them standard members and cost share members. We call them full-time federal and full-time non-federal members. So nothing like confusing everyone. I know. The total amount does calculate, and it appears in the member support column. The member support column basically is money that goes directly to the member. It doesn't go to you. It's not from us to you. It's not yours. It's not our. It goes directly to the member. And so that's why there's that weird third column there in the member support column. So just because we're a unique federal grant, that's kind of how they've worked that out. The end of service award or the education award or cash stipend, we do again encourage all your members to be put under the education award, even though that is a guesstimate. The healthcare coverage line item will auto-calculate, so you just plug in the number of members and it will auto-calculate. And then any travel or other volunteer expenses are optional, so that is something that you most certainly can do in the system if that's something that you guys are providing. In the budget instructions, it gives you all of this information. The budget instructions are a separate instruction, so you're not going to find them in the big application instructions. They're actually a separate document, so keep that in mind. However, it's not going to give you some of the dollar figures, just because these are budgets for nationwide programs. Iowa does, every geographic area has a different cost of living and therefore a different living allowance amount. And the education award does change regularly. So they leave those out strategically. So here on slide 29, this does outline some of this information. Again, this is also outlined in your continuation notification that got sent out in February, but I just wanted to make sure that folks are aware of that. The amount can adjust if there is a COLA or cost of living adjustment that is incorporated by CNCS. So we just want to make sure that people are aware of that. The living allowance amount for Iowa currently right now is $11,880 for a regular, so a standard or a cost share member. The leader living allowance for Iowa is $14,200 per year. The education award amount currently is $5,815. The standard or cost share member end of service stipend is $1,500, and then a leader end of service stipend is $3,000. So again, this information is not in the instructions, but it was sent out in the application letter from our office. So it is outlined in that piece of information as well. This is really what the budget looks like. So if you can see, here's the member support column that I was talking about, the grantee share, the CNCS share, and then the total. So section 1, section 2, and so your full-time federal down here at the bottom under section 2, line A, there's a full-time federal. You'll see that that amount is all the way over in the member support column. And then the full-time federal, or the full-time non-federal, is in the grantee share, because the grantee share, that's your cost share amount. That's what you're providing. So I know that can be a little confusing to folks because it is a little weird and wonky, but just make sure that folks are aware of that. So that's kind of the differences amongst them. And then this just kind of shows section 2 a little bit better and how it's broken down. So this is the budget view. There's a budget narrative view that is built off of what you plug into the budget. So keep that in mind. Again, full-time federal is the standard members. Full-time non-federal is your cost share members or what you're providing. So just make sure that anything you provide goes under grantee share, and that should make sense, hopefully. Any questions about the budget? All right. I'm going to quickly run through documentation. So for continuation applications year 2 and 3, you do need to submit the following documents: letters of support for the proposed project. You do have to have, we do recommend 2 letters of support. Those do need to be updated every year. In addition, you do need to submit VISTA assignment descriptions, or VADs, at least one per position proposed. A lot of P's in there. So these are 2 separate things that do have to be submitted in year 2. The other documentation that is listed does not need to be submitted unless there has been a change from previous years, so keep that in mind. Page 26 of the application instructions walks you through this documentation, or these attachments that need to be created or sent in, not created, sent in. If nothing has changed from year 1 or year 2 or year 3, then you don't have to send in the additional information besides the VAD and the letters of support, but just be mindful of that. After you have submitted the documents, change the default status in eGrants from not sent to sent or not applicable. Nothing should be not sent. If it's not sent, it's going to give you an error message when you try to validate that application. So it's either not applicable, which in everyone's instance, the negotiated indirect cost agreement is not applicable. However, most everything else should be either not sent, or either sent or not applicable. So just keep that in mind. You cannot attach these documents in eGrants. These do need to be sent in separate format to us at ia@cns.gov or to your designated program officer. We then download them into eGrants. So we do encourage you to not put them all together into one big formatted file, but actually separate each document out, so each individual thing, and label it appropriately so we can easily access it and then download it appropriately as it needs to be attached in the grant. So hopefully that makes sense, but again, just send them to ia@cns.gov or to your designated program officer. The final step in this is to review, authorize, and submit. This is where really the sections list out. You're going to ensure that all the information is correct, and then basically review over it. So you do need to read the authorizations, assurances, and certifications carefully. These are things that you basically, it's those terms that we always sign off on everything that no one ever reads. Make sure you read those and complete the section for the assurances and certification. So again, making sure the authorized representative has their own eGrants account. That may be you, or it may be someone else. eGrants will generate a list of errors where there's sections that need to be corrected prior to the submission, so just be mindful of that. If you do get some errors, as I said, the education award amount might pop up an error, and if there is an application, or not an application, a documentation that is in not sent, will likely pop up an error as well. So it will tell you if there's errors, and then you can go back and reference those. So any questions about the application instructions? So we have just a few minutes, and I wanted to quickly go over the VADs. We did do a separate training on VADs a while ago, but the VADs, or the VISTA assignment descriptions, again, are submitted separate from the documents in eGrants. There is a sample VAD, so if you're looking for kind of what a good VAD should consist of, there's a sample on there. It does only give one example. It doesn't list out everything, but it does give a few good examples on there. There's a blank template. This is the template that you'll use to create the VADs that you'll submit to us. So there's a template that you can actually use and work in. VISTA sponsors are asked to fill out the VAD for each member that they're going to have on the project, each description, and use the sample template. So sometimes people try to create their own. It just doesn't work very well. So please use the blank template that is there. The VAD explains the project position, the roles assigned to the members, includes goals, objectives, and activities. Again, you're going to submit these to the ia@cns.gov website. Once the application is approved, and the VADs are approved, then you can go in and electronically create the VADs and eGrants in the system and assign the members through the nomination process. So don't upload these in eGrants yet, as they will not carry forward until the application itself is actually approved. So just be mindful of that. If you guys do have any questions, there are some great resources out on the VISTA campus about the VADs, how to write a successful VAD, what to look for. So I do encourage folks to spend some time on those VADs, as well as your site supervisors that you might be working with on how to create a good VAD. So again, just work on those. That's really what the members use to determine, to walk them through their year of service. This is just the VAD template for you guys, just so you have an idea of what it looks like. Again, it's the title, sponsoring organization, all that fun stuff, the overall goal of the project, the objective of this particular assignment, and then the member activities under that. So if you guys have any questions about the VAD and the VAD template, please let us know. But these can be found on the VISTA campus. And then the final slide is just resources that are available to you. The National Service Hotline for technical assistance with eGrants. My knowledge of eGrants is fairly limited if there is a technical issue. So the National Service Hotline might be able to help. You can always call me first, but sometimes I know, but most of the time I don't. The 2017 VISTA program guidance, please review that. It'll be helpful as determining kind of where allocations for VISTA resources are going in the future. The AmeriCorps VISTA project application instructions, the standard VISTA budget instructions, the VISTA assignment descriptions, resources, the performance measurement resources, and then of course eGrants assistance, kind of where to find that information. So this information will be sent, as well as that capacity building and sustainability chart that Geo had requested. And I know I'm talking really quick at this point, but any questions about the continuation application? I know that's a lot of information to throw at you guys, but please read the instructions, number one, and start creating these. These are due March 31st. For almost everyone, so let me know if you do have any questions. We can also set up an individual time to kind of go through your application if you want to, if that would be helpful. You can work with your designated program officer. I guess I should say I am not everyone's designated program officer, so it might be of interest to a few folks. Any questions about the application, the continuation applications? Thank you all for sticking with me. I know we're a few minutes past 3 o'clock at this point, but again, if you guys do have any questions, please let your designated program officer know. We will be sending out additional information to follow up with this call, so folks can refer back to it. If you do need anything, please let us know. But this concludes the continuation application webinar for February 21st, 2017. I thank you all for your time today.